we've been reading. Some of us been reading some of your poetry.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I've got a feeling that one or two of the questions you might get asked are about specific poems.
That's absolutely fine. So I can't see any of you guys, but I'm going to wave. Hi, everybody. So what I will do to start with is I thought I would talk to you really quickly, because I bet you've got loads and loads of questions about why I think writing and reading are so important and kind of how it impacted on me becoming a reader or writer. So really quickly, just put your hands up to your teachers if you kind of think, oh, I don't really like writing. It's not really my thing at the minute. I'm not really sure about it. Have we got any hands up?
Yes.
Yeah, we've got some hands up. Okay, so I didn't like writing and I didn't like reading. Oh, my chair's stuck on the rug. I didn't like reading and writing until I got to about year 6 when my dad gave me a copy of The Hobbit. And I kind of figured, okay, that's the kind of book I can get on board with, that fantasy book. But with writing in particular, put your hands up if you like going on holiday, or if you like playing sport, or playing computer games, or any of those kind of things, riding horses, camel racing, whatever it is that you like. You are growing up in a world now where there are so many different opportunities than when perhaps I was growing up 200 years ago. You know, we didn't have the internet at all when I was a child. So there weren't any of the blogs that you've got now or the online magazines. But if you want to now, you can grow up, you are growing up in a world where you can go and write about playing computer games. So you can go and play the latest computer games and then write about them, whether they're good or bad or whatever. One of my wife's friends from university, her job now, or at least was before COVID, was to just travel England and France, staying in different hotels and then writing about them. Writing about the good points and the bad points. And that was her job. She was paid to go and do it. She was paid to stay in the hotels. So it doesn't really matter what you want to do. Like I say, even if you're into something like camel racing, okay, there are people out there, there are jobs out there that kind of, with writing, with whatever your passion is, you can go and write about it. It's not just about writing books. It's not just about writing newspaper articles or whatever kind of things that you have to write in school. Okay, there's a whole world out there. So don't give up on it. Keep practicing, keep going at it, because it really is such an important skill. Okay, and it's the same with reading. Put your hands up if you've ever been writing and you kind of got, thought, I've got no ideas. I don't know how to get started. I don't know what to do next. I don't know where to go. The only way you will get past that, the only way that becomes easier, is by reading and reading and reading and reading and reading all of these different stories, all of these different books. The more books you read, the easier you will find writing. I was asked by one of the year 1 or 2s, yes, I can't remember which year group it was one of those, and they asked me how many books I'd read in my whole life, and I had no idea. So I went away and had a think last night about how many. I think it is probably in the region of about 400, 500 books that I could kind of think of off the top of my head that I've read in my life. And the more you read, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if you're reading comic books, graphic novels, the newspaper, magazines. The more you read, the more story ideas and the more just different writing ideas you will have. Okay, so for me, it's really important that you don't kind of give up now and don't think, oh, I don't like reading, so I'm never going to like reading. Okay, I didn't like reading because when I was a kid at school, we had to read certain books all of the time. We couldn't go and just choose our own books like you guys can. So it got a little bit boring. It was only when I could then in year 6 choose the books that I wanted to read that I found those books that I love. If you put me on a desert island now with kind of horror books and thriller books and autobiographies, and that's all I could ever read, I would say that I didn't like reading because I don't like those kind of books. My wife loves them, but I don't. But if you put me on a desert island with fantasy and adventure and all of that kind of stuff, then I would love reading. So it's just about finding that book or that type of book. Now, I asked the year 4s yesterday, year 3s and 4s, and you've got a public library quite close, I think, haven't you? Obviously, everything's closed at the moment. But when the libraries open back up, go and make the most of it. Okay, go and talk to the librarians. Tell them what kind of book you might have liked, even if it's only a little bit, and they will find you books that are like that you will love. Okay, so that's my kind of really quick introduction about why I think reading and writing kind of is important, why it's impacted on me. I'm not going to do too much about being a writer because I imagine a lot of that will come out in the questions. So I'll leave it to the teachers to choose who wants to ask the questions first. Chime in whenever. I'll leave it up to you to decide who goes first.
Our first question from 60 is, how long does it take you to write a book from the beginning to the final piece?
Oh, that's a good question. I was asked that one yesterday as well. If it's quite weird because it's a long process. When I wrote The Spyglass and the Cherry Tree, which was my first one, that took me just over 2 years to write. But the reason it took me just over 2 years was because, like you guys, I bet there's been times when you've sat down and started a piece of writing in class and thought, no, I don't like it. It's rubbish. I want to start again. I want to throw it away. I want to put lines through it and everything. And that's a bit what I was like with Spyglass and the Cherry Tree. I wrote a bit for about 6 months and didn't like it, so I stopped. Then I went back to it and so on and so on. So that took about 2.5 years. The second one in that series, The Shadowed Eye, that only took me 10 months to a year to write. And the Monster Academy ones, which are a lot thinner, they take about 3 months. But once I've written a book, it then gets sent off to my editor, who's a lady called Pam, who lives in New York. And Pam is very much like your teachers. So I will send her the writing and she will send it back to me, and it just comes back with like covered in kind of marking. So grammar errors, kind of story plot errors. So if I've got in one paragraph, she's got a blue dress on, and then the next page she's got a red dress on, or anything like that. So she goes through and marks it like your teacher does. And we do that 3 times. And that normally takes about 3 months to get through that. Then it will get sent off to the illustrators. Whether that's Amelia Rendon, who illustrates the Monster Academy books, or Alex Hurtado, who illustrates the covers for the other ones. And again, that can take anywhere from 3 months to kind of 6 months to get those through all the drafts. And then it will be ready to go. So it even once I've finished writing it, it can take another 9 months to 12 months to get it ready to go kind of on sale. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, we had a question sort of linked on from that. Wanted to know whether or not you started a book and then decided that you didn't fancy it anymore, and then you finished it. You didn't get to the end. You decided to end it where you got to.
I have, yeah. I mean, I've got a whole folder on my computer just full of kind of story starters where I've started. I've probably got 4,000 or 5,000 words into it, and then thought, actually, I don't know where this is going as a story. But they all come in really handy. When the Spyglass and the Cherry Tree is kind of an epic fantasy, so it's a bit like Lord of the Rings. So it's all battles and magic and mystery. But one of the chapters I originally wrote when the girl who starts off on Earth was at school was quite silly and quite funny. And I wrote that chapter, and as I was going through editing with Pam, she kind of says, this doesn't fit in this book. Its tone is different and it drags on a little bit, so get rid of it. So I got rid of that chapter from The Spyglass and the Cherry Tree. But then when I started writing The Grand High Monster, which is the 3rd Monster Academy, that stuff that I'd written, that idea that I'd had, the silly thing that happened in the school, actually really fit in well with The Grand High Monster. So obviously I had to change the characters, tweak it and rework it. But the actual idea that I'd had came in really handy in a later book. So I never throw any ideas away. But yeah, I've probably got about 12, 13 stories that kind of just sat there at 2,000 or 3,000 words that then might come in useful later on.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Matt. I got a question from 5M, which is, this is from George. What inspired you to be an author?
Oh, good question. So I don't know if you know, but I was a teacher for about 9 years, 8.5, 9 years. I was a primary school teacher. And at the time when I started writing The Spyglass, which was in 2015, I was teaching year 5. And we were going through all of the kind of things that you have to learn in year 5 with your writing, all of the fronted adverbials, prepositional phrases, all of that kind of stuff, starting a new sentence with a different word and all of that really important stuff. And just as kind of an exercise with the children, I decided, right, I want to try and write a short story for my class, just using all of the techniques that I was trying to teach them, to see if it was possible to kind of write a story in the way that we teach children to write. And it was really, really hard to get it to flow. It was really hard to create a narrative from it. and I later found it's because pretty much all children's books are kind of aimed at year 4 upwards. So even kind of books you read in year 6, like Wonder or Pig Heart Boy and things like that, their reading age is year 4, just for various sales reasons. And so what we were trying to write in year 5 and what you're writing in year 5 and what you're writing in year 6 is actually at a higher level than most of the books that you're reading. But once I started writing the short story, I kind of fell in love with writing, and I liked the story that I'd started to write. So I carried on writing it, just not using all of the techniques. I kind of had to dumb it down a little bit from year 5. My children were writing at a higher level than I was. So that's kind of what kickstarted it all, was trying to show my class, look, what I'm teaching you is really, amazing, and it's really important. And then I was like, oh my goodness, I can't write like this. So the children were even better than me.
Thank you. One of our questions from 5F would be, what has been your favourite book to write and why?
That's really hard. It's like asking me which is my favourite daughter. So I think I'm going to break it down slightly. My favourite fantasy book that I've written was probably the Machu Picchu mystery, which is the latest Monster Academy. And that's because I by now the readers of that kind of group are a little bit older, so I could go a little bit more scary. So it's more Scooby-Doo kind of spooky, and that was quite fun. But the most fun I've had writing was this one, which hasn't actually got a cover. It's not actually out yet. It's still very much in editing, which is a World War II story. And it's all about a child who's evacuated from London and has to move to Cornwall. And on the way, he meets a boy who has been evacuated from Germany, a Jewish boy, through the Kindertransport. And it kind of looks at their parallel journeys, but in a very different way. And that was great fun to write, because actually it's set in the real world. And I had to go and research everything. And I went down to Cornwall, where it's set in St. Mawes, and I spoke to their historical society, and I've managed to interview some Holocaust survivors. So from a kind of interest point of view, that was a real different change of pace for me, because everything else I've written is all imaginary and made up and set in different worlds and is fantasy. So that was a really interesting write. And plus I got to spend a few days in Cornwall in August, end of August, when we were finally allowed out, which was good fun. So I think that's probably the most fun I've had writing it.
Back to 6C, Izzy. Yeah, we've got some big Harry Potter fans. We've spotted your shelf with Harry Potter on it at the back there. And we wondered what your favourite book is that you have ever read.
Oh, I get asked this one all the time as well, and it's so hard. My favourite author is Terry Pratchett. But he's a little bit grown up for kind of children's books. He's probably more teenager. But as a reader myself, Terry Pratchett is my favourite author. But I do read a lot of children's books. My favourite children's books are probably Nevermore. I don't know if anybody's read Nevermore by Jessica Townsend. Just anything by Sophie Anderson, The Girl Who Speaks Bear, The Castle of Tangled Magic, House of Chicken Legs. Any of those are just amazing. If anybody loves or is kind of concerned about global warming and the environment, Scavengers by Darren Simpson is absolutely amazing. It's a standalone book. There's no series. I think at the minute, that and I don't know, Train to Impossible Places is brilliant by P.G. Bell. So just so many. There's too many to pick a favourite book. Again, it's easier to pick a favourite child.
Agreed.
Could we just ask a question? You've sort of answered it in some of your other answers, but we just wanted to know, in terms of obviously being an author, I know financially you're obviously, doing the writing to earn a living and make some money and things, but we just wanted to know as a class, why is it so important to you to be a writer? Why do you write books? Or what would you say that do you have you sort of sit there and think, wow, this is brilliant. I'm really pleased that this is happening because of my books, or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll touch on both as well. So with the finances, I always get asked, am I a millionaire anyway? So I don't mind talking about money in publishing. Nobody writes books really to make huge amounts of money, unless you're J.K. Rowling or David Walliams. That's why most authors do school visits as well and things like that. But I write because I like to joke now that I get the best of both worlds. I loved being a teacher, but it got to the point where I was writing my own stuff. I also write for the Literacy Shed, and I was teaching, and I just had so many things on that I had to make a decision. So I left teaching last Christmas just in time to go self-employed, through a pandemic, which was great timing. But I now get the best of both worlds. So I get to write, I get to keep my mind active by writing so many different things, but I also get to do the fun stuff of being a teacher. So I get to come into schools normally and do writing workshops and write with children and inspire children without having any of the planning or marking, which is great. So I think it's also, with reading, there's I love reading because it transports you to another world, even if it's a fiction book or kind of a based on reality book like my World War II one, you're still transported somewhere. And by writing, I get to control that transport. I get to control where people go and control the worlds that they go to and inspire them with different ideas and kind of, that's what I love about writing. I love being able to build worlds. Like with the Monster Academy, I was reading The Worst Witch with my daughter, and we kind of were talking about the fact that the Worst Witch, I can't remember her name now, but she goes to Mildred Hubble, that's it. She goes to Miss Cackle's academy and finds out she's a witch. Harry Potter goes to Hogwarts and finds out he's a wizard. We were kind of chatting about, well, what would happen if they went to these schools filled with monsters, but actually they weren't a monster? They were just perfectly ordinary. And that's what happens with Monster Academy. So this girl's school closes, and the only school that can take her on is the Monster Academy, which is a school for monsters. So she has to kind of fit into this school with vampires and werewolves and things like that. So it kind of came out of a discussion, and I got to explore that idea because I was writing and because I could put it into a book. So that's one of the best things, really, is just to have an idea and go. It drives my wife mad because I'll often just run off to write something down, but it is quite a good outlet.
Thanks.
Hi, Matt. I've got a question from one of the children based on that, linked to that. Are any of the characters from Monster Academy based on children you've taught?
Not so much in Monster Academy. The main characters in the main girl in the Spyglass and the Cherry Tree is based on kind of a combination of 3 girls that I taught at the time. And that was purely because they came to me, they knew I was writing this book, and originally the main character was a boy. And they came to me absolutely fuming. They'd watched Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, I can't remember which one it was, and they were annoyed that there weren't any fantasy books with a girl as the main character that they wanted to go and read. This is, obviously going back 5 or 6 years. And so I kind of changed that into a girl character, and a lot of the characteristics are based on those girls. One of the workshops I run when I come into schools is actually building characters based on people that and then changing and tweaking and changing until they're unrecognizable, but they're still a realistic character. Miss Flopsbottom, the headmistress in the Monster Academy, is actually based on my old Year 5 teacher, who was this big, kind of scary looking woman. And when you were a child, you'd go in, you were like, oh no, I've got Mrs. Lamb. And you'd look at her and you'd be like, oh, she's so scary, she's so loud. But then actually, when you got into her class, she was amazing. She was really kind and caring and an absolutely brilliant teacher. But like, she was the deputy head or assistant head, and she's like, oh no, I don't want Mrs. Lamb. And that's kind of where the headmistress is based on in Monster Academy. So I do use real life, as I think most authors do. We cheat.
Thank you.
We've got Tom in our class would like to know what the pet is behind you.
Oh. So there's a mixture in there. So there are green anole lizards, and there are sun beetles, if you want to Google them, and then there are millipedes that are about this big, giant Congo millipedes. So they're all in there. And then these are the fruit flies. I was having to show these to the Year 4s yesterday. So they're the fruit flies that they all eat as well. And on the other side of that wall is a big tank with fire-bellied toads in. And they are all remnants of when I was teaching, and I could get away with having cool class pets. And then obviously when I left teaching, they had to come home with me, and my wife was less than pleased. So now they're out here in the garage with me. My study's actually in the garage. So yeah, they came with me from school when I left teaching.
Back to 6C, Jess has got a question, and she would like to know when or if you get mental writer's block, What do? Do you stand up? Do you go out for a walk? Do you go and make yourself a cup of tea? Do you abandon it? Or do you just keep trying to plow on?
All of the above, really. I mean, I don't know a single writer that doesn't get writer's block. We all get it. And sometimes I will come out here to the study and I'll sit here and spend 8 hours and write, 300, 400, 500 words, which is about one of your pages in your book. And then other days I'll come out and I'll write 5,000 or 6,000 words. And so if I'm stuck, I'm quite lucky because I do the Literacy Shed stuff and I do my own stuff and I do a little bit of freelance for other people. I can always switch. So if I'm getting stuck writing one of my books, I'll switch and try and write something else. Or what I tend to do is a really good technique, and it sometimes works in class if your teachers will let you, sometimes doesn't because it doesn't quite work. But if you are stuck writing something, I always jump to another point that I know what I want to write. So most of my books, I tend to write the middle bit first because that's the idea I tend to spark with. So with the World War II one, I knew I wanted this evacuee and this kinder transport child to meet. And that was kind of going to be the relationship I wanted to focus on. So I started by writing that relationship. And then afterwards, I went back and filled in the beginning. So sometimes if I get to a point where I really can't think what I want to write next, I'll either think, right, can I write something later on in the story? Can I go to a later chapter and write that bit? Can I write the conclusion, or can I write an earlier bit? Or I'll go for a walk, or I will just take myself somewhere else and try and do something else, which neither of those really work in class. But the idea of perhaps just thinking about it from a different point of view helps as well. So if you're writing a text from a main character's point of view and you've got stuck as to where you are, even in your head or in a jotter or a notebook, just try writing the next bit from another character's point of view. So if they're just about to face off with the kind of the villain in the story and you're stuck, think, right, I'm just going to write the next few paragraphs in my jotter from the point of view of the villain, what he's seeing, what he's feeling, what's happening there, because you'll find you start to write again. And that's the hardest part. Okay. And it's the same when you sit there and stare at a page and can't get started. Just write some rubbish sentences to get yourself started, because then you'll get into the flow and then you can always go back and edit. Okay. I'm guessing you all kind of sit there and self-edit and peer edit and all of that kind of stuff when you're writing. So having that, once you've got started, you'll find the ideas start to come out.
Thank you. Starting from the middle is quite a unique idea, something we might try. Thank you.
No problem. It does work well if you plan for it in class. I used it quite a few times when I was teaching, and if you plan your sequence with that, it works. If they go and do it off on their own, it can kind of throw it out of kilter.
Okay. I've got a couple. One very, very short question that one person in my class, Belle, is very keen to know. Please don't be too specific on this. She wants to know, where do you live? Which is a bit of a random question.
So I live in Leicester.
Okay, that's probably as broad as it needs to be. Thank you. And the second one was, you obviously spoken about the teacher earlier on. Was there a particular or any particular instance in your life that made you sort of, or inspired you to write a particular book or a section of a book that you thought, absolutely, this life experience, I'm going to take this and use it in one of my books? Yeah,
there was. And I won't go into have you done World War II? Have any of you looked at kinder transport and World War II and things like that? Right in the World War II, there's a part in the book where the kinder transport child leaves Germany on the kinder transport, and it's a horrible scene. His dad kind of gets on the train with him and rides as far as he can with him on the train, kind of sneaks onto the kinder train with him, knowing full well that if they're caught, then that's it. And he sneaks on and goes as far as he can to the edge of Germany, and then gets off the train. And then, as you would expect with what happens. But that was based on an actual when I interviewed the Holocaust survivors at the National Holocaust Museum in Nottingham, and I spoke to them, that actually happened to one of those, almost verbatim with the story. And that really impacted on me, being able to talk to those people and hear their stories. I kind of wanted to tell them in a way that was sympathetic and empathetic, but actually that got the message out to people. Actually, these things did happen. So that really impacted on me, and was something that I really wanted to include in the books.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Hi, Matt. I've got a couple of questions, same as one sort of based on one of the poems that or some of the poetry from Tigurit, is why do you like bogies so much? And the second one is, what is your favourite movie?
So with the bogies, firstly, they're quite clearly hilarious. Bogies and trumps are, I don't care what any adult says, hilarious. I also don't care what your teachers say, children. Every teacher does pick and eat. Okay, I know that they might deny it, but every teacher does. You watch them when they're driving. And my favourite film, oh, I love Toy Story. I love the Toy Stories. I think they're really good ideas. I love all of those. Just bear with me. Alexa, stop. Just got a reminder coming through. So yeah, I like the Toy Story films. I like good thinking films. I absolutely hate scary films and horror films. I don't like being terrified at all.
Thank you. Another question from 5F. Why do you use different illustrators for your books and not keep the same one?
Good question. So I use Amelia Rendon for the Monster Academy ones because these are for younger readers. So Monster Academy are kind of for ages 8 to 12, really. So the illustrations, I'm trying to find one here. So the illustrations kind of need to appeal to that age group. So Amelia Rendon's got quite a more child-friendly illustration style, and she does the covers and things like that. Whereas Alex Hurtado, he does much more kind of fantasy, slightly older. So the Spyglass and that series is more for year 6 and above, just because of the battle scenes in there and things like that. So they have very different styles. And also the Spyglass series doesn't have any illustrations inside. It's just cover art. So it tends to be different styles. I am looking to work with Amelia Rendon on a picture book, but that's probably a couple of years away as well. So she will be doing something else for me as well.
Thank you. That's lovely. Our next question is kind of a bit tied into that, actually. With the Amy would like to know in 6C, the illustrations, do you picture exactly what the characters look like, or do you give your illustrators a little bit more space to sort of create it a little bit further?
Yes, I think I've got permission to share screen. Bear with me, because I can show you exactly what happens. I'm just trying to find where it is. Here we go, school sessions. Let me just load up this PowerPoint. Because what happens is I tend to give her an idea of what I want, and then, oh, Zoom's disappeared. Hang on. There we go. So if I share, oh no, I can't share. Are you able to allow sharing, or is it?
Mr. Massangiri, you need to make
I'm on it.
permission. Good.
Oh, there we go.
Good to go now, Matt.
There we go. So can you see that?
Yeah.
Yep. Can you see the PowerPoint? So that's Amelia, and I still haven't got a picture of Alex Hurtado, even though I've been asking him for about a year and a half. So what I sent to Amelia is something amazing like that. So you can all appreciate that I am an amazing artist. So I will send her that, and it's that bad that I have to put notes on it as to who it is and what they're doing. But then because she's so brilliant, she will take that and turn it into something like that. Okay, so I always kind of try and push in these things that actually, you know what, we talk about reading, we talk about writing, but if you like drawing, and if you're talented at drawing and you love drawing, keep going with it, because illustrators are so essential to books. You know, can you imagine the Gruffalo without Axel Scheffer's illustrations, or any of the Roald Dahls without Quentin Blake's sketchy illustrations? It just isn't the same book. We need illustrators. So stick at your drawing as well. But that's what Amelia can then come back with. We'll then have a discussion, any tweaks, she'll then start to colour it. And then as we go through, so like Colin, the werepoodle, he's a cursed werewolf, and he turns into a pink poodle every full moon instead of a wolf. So she's obviously done in brown. So we'll have a conversation, change that to pink, and so on, and then it goes onto the front cover. So yeah, she's incredibly talented. Same for inside. So she'll send me a group of illustrations, like these are her sketches for inside the book. and I'll approve them or ask for any tweaks and things like that. And then we work from there, and they then become the final illustrations. So yeah, she's very talented and takes my terrible sketches and makes them much better.
Just connected very quickly, where do you find your illustrators?
Through recommendations. So Amelia, just somebody recommended her to me, who'd worked with her before. It's quite a big world out there with lots and lots of people. So recommendations are really the best way to make sure you find somebody that can do the job and do it well.
Just a couple of quick ones. Do you want me to ask it? Yeah. How much, or do you want me to ask who pays it? Yeah. Who? Just on that, we weren't going to ask this one, but we've got a question coming about whether or not who pays the illustrator.
Okay,
very money driven in our classroom.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm always happy to talk about it. I think it's important to be open. There are two different ways to kind of get books out now. You can go through big publishing houses. They're incredibly hard to get into. So things like what's called traditional publishing, or you can kind of go independent publishing, a bit like bands. You can either be a band signed to a big record label or an indie band. At the moment, most of what I do is the indie way, but I will be looking for traditional publishers for the World War II one. So I pay for the illustrators for mine, I pay for the editing, I pay for all of that kind of stuff. And then hopefully make it back by selling the books. And it works both ways. So I get more control over my books, and I make a little bit more money than the normal traditional author. So if you take kind of a traditional author, somebody like Sophie Anderson or Jessica Townsend with Nevermore, anything like that, when you buy their book full price from somewhere like Waterstones, they will probably make about 10 pence per book, absolute maximum, maybe 8 or 9 pence. If you buy their book from Tesco, where it's half price, it's like £3.50, £4, they're going to make half of that money. So they'll probably make about 3 or 4 pence per book. So the way they make so much money, the way like J.K. Rowling will be the same. Whenever somebody buys Harry Potter at full price, she'll make about 10 pence. They make so much money because they sell tens and hundreds of millions of copies, and tens and hundreds of millions of 10 pences is a lot of money. But most authors don't make that much. So that's why I try and ask people where they can buy them from, bookshops, because independent bookshops need saving. But authors make more, and myself included, when you buy them full price. And I make a little bit more than that per book, but then I have to do everything myself. So I do all my own marketing and things like that.
Thank you. And the less financially driven question that we had was you've spoken a little bit about influencers. I just wanted to know any of the names of the characters in your books, whether there be the actual names or any characteristics being inspired by people that you maybe went to school with, or that you're in your family, or that you know.
Yeah, I mean, it all kind of creeps in. So the main character in Monster Academy, there are little bits of my own daughter in there, the kind of stubbornness, the kind of kind-hearted but know-it-allism. I mean, she'd shout at me if she heard me saying this. I have told her. So yeah, but people that they always tend to come in little ways. I wouldn't say they're based on people that I know, but there are characteristics that come in. The actual names, especially in Monster Academy, I just went for funny. So there's like Mr. Snickle Tinkle, Miss Flopsbottom, the headmistress. I just thought I like funny names. But in The Spyglass and the Cherry Tree, most of the names of the goblins, if anybody's read that, are actual Old English words. So like there's a goblin in there called Weird, W-E-A-R-D, and that's Old English for healer, like a medicine kind of healer thing. And like Snowbroth is in there, which is kind of like the old English word, like 1400s English word for kind of that sludge that you get on the edge of snow. It's called Snowbroth. So I just kind of looked for cool sounding Old English words for that. A bit like Harry Potter, like Dumbledore was an Old English word for like a village idiot kind of thing. Hagrid is a word for somebody who's kind of scruffy and unkempt. So
okay, thank you.
Hi, Matt. I've got a couple of questions from Hayden. Firstly is, do you have a special place to sit when you're writing? Or if you get an idea, do you just go and write anywhere? And the second question is, if you had to choose one of your books to live in, which would it be?
Good question. I've never been asked that living one before. So I always do all my writing here in the study. I've got various notebooks, like handwritten notebooks, floating around the house, and I'll scribble down ideas if I have them, or I'll scribble them on my phone. I don't tend to handwrite much. My handwriting's too messy. So I tend to just try and take notes on my phone, or then write in here, which, like I said, is out in the study. If I could live in any, it would be in the Spyglass and the Cherry Tree world on Ithilmir, because I love that whole idea of, big battles and magic and adventure and that kind of epic fantasy. I'd love to live somewhere like that.
Thank you.
Another question we've got is, what did you like about teaching?
I think one of my favorite times in my life was at university. And I think the reason I love university was because I was constantly being set kind of challenges to go and do. So they'd set you assignments to go and do something. And I did multimedia computing at university. I didn't do teaching. I didn't get into teaching until later on in life. So when I found teaching after being a web developer, and it was the same thing as being at university. There was these constant challenges, whether it was trying to find a fun way to teach the ancient Egyptians, or whether it was trying to find a way to kind of teach music, even though I have the musical ability of a brick. It's all of these different kind of things. You're constantly teaching yourself, aren't you, as a teacher? You're constantly learning new things. And that was what I loved about teaching, learning new things and then trying to find fun ways to kind of pass that off to the children. And just the little tidbits that you find as you go about your day. You might watch a David Attenborough thing and then just spend half an hour talking about it with the children when you're supposed to be doing maths or something like that. You go off on a tangent and they're interested, and that back and forth. So that's what I miss most about teaching, I think. So I think that must be what I enjoyed most about it, because that's what I miss.
Can I just ask, following on from that, I know we had Felix from 5F wanted to know that he...
Oh, sorry, you've gone mute.
He would like to either be a teacher or an author, and he was interested to know if you had another job before being an author and a teacher.
So when I left university, I worked as a kind of graphic designer, designing marketing for gyms for a company for about a year and a half. Like I said, I did multimedia computing, so it kind of tied in with that. And then I went to be a web developer for about 5 years, 6 years, and did that, which I loved. But then it got a little bit boring. My wife was a teacher. And I, kind of thought, I'll be a teacher. Anyone can be a teacher. At which point my wife says, no, don't be ridiculous. If you want to be a teacher, you've got to go and volunteer in the school for a year. So I did a day a week volunteering in school and realized how absolutely hard and difficult a job it is. But loved it. So I went and trained to be a primary school teacher. You don't have to do one or the other. It's amazing how many authors started as primary school teachers. Okay, there are so many, if you talk to them, started out working in schools. I don't know if anyone's read Crater Lake. I think Jennifer Killick started out as a teacher. My old teacher who I talked about, who became Miss Flopsbottom in my book, she's an author now. And she writes romance for adults, but she's an author as well. So you don't have to choose between one or the other, and lots do it kind of simultaneously, lots do it at the same time. I was very fortunate that I could make that choice and leave one to do the other. But yeah, they're both absolutely fantastic careers to go into. You've got much more financial security being a teacher than you have being an author. You're very much at the whims of the market.
Thank you.
As we head towards lunch, we had one other question saying, what is your favourite food?
My favourite food? I'm not very healthy. My favourite foods tend to be things like crisps or chocolate. So I'm trying to be healthy today. I've actually got a corned beef stew on at the moment, and that was my Alexa reminder. I need to go and put some dumplings in it in a minute for my lunch with my daughter, because she's homeschooling at the minute. She's off doing her year 5 stuff. So yeah, probably unhealthy stuff. I don't want to promote it too much, healthy schools and all that, but crisps and chocolate. And that is one of the downsides of leaving teaching and working from home. When everybody else is off at work and not homeschooling, I'm left pretty much to my own devices with the fridge, which is very unhealthy. Whereas when I was teaching, you have those strict times. I was much healthier as a teacher.
Thank you.
Hi, Matt. I've just got one of the children in the class who just wants to know, like, very quickly, what's your favourite animal?
Probably frogs. I do like frogs, various types, like the five-bellied toads I've got, poison dart frogs. I just like the cool colours that they come in.
Thank you. Guys, has anybody got any more questions?
Tell you what, if you have, I'm going to go put my dumplings in, but if you do have any more questions, ask your teachers and they can send them through to me. Okay, I know you've got my contact details, so you can kind of send them through there. Miss Topping.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you, Matt.
Fine. And thank you for having me. Hopefully it's been useful. Hopefully when the world opens up, I might get a chance to come and work with you and do some workshops and things like that, and see you all in person rather than staring at your admittedly handsome teachers.
Thank you. Bye
Right,
now.
thank you. See you later. Bye.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.